Marhaba, and welcome to the Matrix Green Pill, where real people connect.
Hello and welcome back to the Matrix Green Pill podcast. I'm Hilmarie Hutchison, and today I am so privileged to have Sophie Smith as my guest on the show. Sophie's lifetime ambition is to make healthcare affordable and accessible for all women. Such a noble and meaningful goal to have. She is the founder and CEO of Nabta Health, and earlier this year she launched the 2022 Angels Movement. We'll get a bit more into that in the podcast, but really, truly impressive. Sophie, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Hilmarie.
Some of our listeners probably already know about you and who you are, but for those who don't, could you please share a little bit about your history and how you ended up in the Middle East?
Sure. So I don't have a medical background at all. I actually read history at Cambridge. And then when I was at Cambridge, got involved in more than one way with a guy who worked in the engineering department and was building a system, a very, very early artificially intelligent system that used Bayesian methods for spoken dialogue management. And I got involved training this system with him. And that's when I became involved in technology and really interested in it. I learned to program. I then went to work at Accenture as a technology consultant for 4 years. Not a consultant in the way you probably think of Accenture consultants, really plugged into routers, sitting in contact centers, building operating models. That was the kind of consultant I was. After about 4 years, I decided that I wanted to manage my own career trajectory and learning curve. I started my first company, which doesn't even feature on my LinkedIn profile, actually. It was a little company that was developing a product to solve the issue of expense submission, which was something that we did at Accenture every 2 weeks, taking all of our expenses, all of our receipts, photographing them, and then manually entering them into a form that we submitted to reclaim them. And it was a really headachy, time-consuming process. And I thought, what if you could have an app that integrated with point of sale systems that collected and categorized, your expenses for you so that when you needed to submit them at the end of the month, you just pressed a button. Turns out integrating anything with point of sale systems is notoriously difficult. And we quickly realized that we were never going to be able to compete with the existing players who were developing similar solutions. So we ditched it. I set up a software development company instead. And then pretty quickly afterwards, set up a doctor finding appointment booking platform in Pakistan, which I ran for a couple of years until my business partner and I stopped seeing eye to eye on the best way to employ people. I sold my stake in that business to him, set up a plastic recycling company in Sierra Leone that does waste plastics to roads, and then moved with my husband to Dubai in 2016, actually, for his job. And I went to speak at a conference in Kuwait on diabetes, which was something I'd done during the sort of software development journey. And at this conference, got chatting to the organizer, not about diabetes, but about the fact that I was pregnant, which fascinated him. And a month or so later, he sent me a whole lot of stats on women's health in the region and said, do you want to do something on women's health together? And the stats were pretty poor. So 80% of women were diagnosed with breast cancer at stage 4, which has a 27% 5-year survival rate versus 99% at stages 1 and 2. 40% of women didn't attend a single antenatal appointment. I mean, they were poor enough that I thought there's work to be done here. So I asked him for a couple of months to hand over my existing business interests and have the baby that I was expecting. And in the end, actually, we started Nabta the day my son was due, 21st of March, 2017. Spent 4 years in R&D, trying to build a platform that we could scale across emerging markets, so Middle East, Africa, South Asia, a platform that combined digital and traditional healthcare into a hybrid model. We coined the term hybrid healthcare back in 2018 and have kind of been developing our thinking around it over the past couple of years. And now we're starting, as of earlier this year, to commercialize the model. We recently acquired our first clinic, and we will be looking to scale that women-centric model of primary care across the GCC over the next couple of years.
Wow, you have done so much. Okay, so let's just jump back a little bit and just bite-sized pieces for me here. What I love is that you certainly seem to have a desire for creating solutions. So where you see a gap, you see something can be done better, you don't just hold back and think, oh, well, it could be. You actually go out and you create a solution, which I think is fantastic. When you first started back in the day, you spoke about doing software development, technology, computer programming. This wasn't sort of a woman-centric, or could not have been too many women doing what you were doing. Or am I wrong?
I think sadly, you're potentially right. I don't think so. I'm the oldest of 8 children. In many ways, my siblings and I were all brought up in a very equal way. We were given the same opportunities in terms of extracurricular activities. We went to the same types of schools. And I played football from a young age. I played it again at university. I was never told at any point explicitly, there are things that you can't do because you are a girl, or later, there are things you can't do because you're a woman. It was only after I left university, actually, and started at Accenture, it became apparent to me for the first time that there were differences in terms of the gender balance in the workforce. I think in my team at Accenture, we were about 18 people, and we were maybe 2 or 3 women, and the rest were men. And again, I don't think I really thought about it that much until I saw some of them starting to have children. Then I realized just what a difference there was between a woman's experience of planning a career and a family and a man's. My decision to leave Accenture, apart from the learning curve thing, was very much, even back then, and I didn't have a husband, I wasn't expecting a baby, I had no immediate family planning priorities, but it was a conscious decision to leave because I knew that when I came to having a family, I wanted to be able to have and structure my own work-life balance. My mum, both my parents are doctors. My mum qualified and then didn't end up practicing after she had me, because being a medical professional alongside having large families is really a very difficult thing to do as a woman. You know, if you think that your exams will take you to get to a consultant into your early 30s, and you need to keep practicing kind of a minimum number of hours every week in order to maintain your license as a doctor, if you have small children and it's difficult to access childcare, or you have multiples, or for whatever reason, it's difficult to continue to practice and progress as a young female doctor. So mum was at home with us for most of our childhood. She did a lot of other bits on the side. She taught music at primary school, and in fact was a governor for that school. My parents set up a trust called PACT in 1996 that now has 3 independent schools, and she's the lead governor for one of those schools. So they were setting up schools while setting up their family. She taught psychology for a year, but she never went back to work full-time as a doctor. We all very much appreciated the time that she gave us, the certainty and the continuity that it provided. You know, whenever we came home, mum was there. We could come and go and push boundaries, but whatever happened, when we got home, mum was there. I wanted to be able to give that sense of stability and routine and visibility and quality and quantity time to my own children. But I also knew that I had to work. It's a really strong impulse inside me, I think, to build things. I'm really unhappy if I don't have stuff to build. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is. And so I knew that if I wanted to have a family, whatever I was doing had to be compatible with it, had to allow me the freedom to set aside hours in the day where I could be with my children. It was at that point where I started to think about what work and a family could look like that I started to realize perhaps the status quo didn't match up.
I love that your parents were such fantastic role models for you. Even with your mom, as you said, not going back to work, but still involved with many other things, giving you that mindset that you can do anything, that there is no difference.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, in the startup world, it was a difficult lesson, I guess, to learn that where one might expect things to be equal, they are in fact not. And I was trying to explain the other day, because whenever you talk about the fact that female founders secure less capital every year than men. In fact, in the MENA region, last year, only 1.2% of venture capital went to female founded companies. When you state this, you get a lot of pushback. Oh, well, maybe not as many women start companies, or maybe not as many women raise funds, or maybe women aren't as good at fundraising, or, you know, maybe you don't have your materials the right way. Maybe you're not pitching correctly. Like, people come back with a lot of objections, some of which, you know, may be true, some of which may not. I was trying to explain the reality, the lived reality of this statistic, what it feels like to know that no matter how hard you and all of your peers, because obviously I have a lot of friends who are female founders, no matter how hard all of you work and structure your virtual data rooms and put together your presentation materials and practice your pitches and show your growth and show the IP that you've developed and tick all of these boxes that you're told you need to tick, no matter how hard you try to do that, the likelihood is at the end of the year, still only around 1% to 2% of venture capital will have gone to you and the other female founders like you. In fact, last year, venture capital investment into female founded companies dropped by 50% proportionately in the region. The region saw a record year for investment, $2.6 billion into startups. 50% less went to female founded companies. The reality of that statistic is difficult to live with.
Yeah, that is indeed a sad reality and certainly a long way to go before we'll reach any kind of true equality. Let's talk about your journey as a female investor. Can you walk us through some of your experiences?
In terms of the investment we raised as Nabta, we were self-funded, myself and my original co-founder, to the tune of about $110,000 for the discovery phase of research and development that we did, about 15 months. When we settled on our hybrid healthcare model, we decided to raise a pre-seed round of $500,000, and we raised and closed that with angel investors, 11 angels in total, ticket by ticket over about 16 to 18 months. And that kept us going for about 2 years through the kind of pre-commercialization phase of R&D. When we got to the March 2020, we were in a point where we really needed to raise the next round, a seed round, to take the thing that we'd built and bring it to market. But that coincided with the start of the pandemic. And in the end, we ended up being delayed opening the round by a year, March 2021. Then over 9 months, we raised and closed a $1.5 million round with 20 angel investors and 2 angel syndicates with tickets from $1,000 right up to $625,000. That process was an interesting one for me. We'd made the decision at the beginning that we wanted to engage more female angel investors. It was really important to us. Only 2 out of our 11 angel investors at pre-seed were female. We wanted more female angel investors because, after all, we're building a hybrid healthcare platform for women. From our experience speaking to women before, a lot of them hadn't made angel investments before. It was kind of a new concept for them. Even the thought of creating portfolios of investments and investing outside of a savings account was kind of a new concept for them. And so we thought, let's make this easier. Let's reduce our minimum ticket size, which at pre-seed had been $25,000. Let's reduce that right down to $1,000. And let's create this special purpose vehicle, which can take investments from dozens of different sources and put them all together into our company, into Nabta Health. We spoke to a lot of people. We spoke to a lot of potential investors. And the more investors we spoke to, the more we realized that there just weren't very many female angel investors out there. The only public list that I could find of angel investors for Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan had exactly 2 female angel investors on it. And everybody else was known kind of on the circuit. They were either part of an existing female angel network, they're a couple, or again, they were people who had started as angel investors and then become limited partners in funds and frankly were tapped out. And that gave rise, the back end of last year, to a movement called the 2022 Female Angels Movement, the sole objective of which initially was to identify and publicly list 2022 female angel investors for emerging markets by the end of the year.
Wow. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about that for sure. Before we get into that, what do you think are some of the reasons why women are hesitant to become investors or participate in the investment industry?
I don't think it has anything to do with being hesitant. It's just that growing up, how we were going to invest our money wasn't a conversation that our parents had with us. Did your mother or father talk to you about investing in stocks and shares or stocks and bonds?
No, but for me, I learned about that at university. So I also started investing in stocks at a young age. But I do think I'm probably the exception to the rule for women.
Yeah, if you haven't studied it, if you think about the conversations that are had by men with their sons growing up, if I think about the conversations that my husband's father had with him, the only thing my husband's father ever wanted to talk to him about is his pension account and how he's investing his pension. If he's got an ISA, which stocks is it invested in? Has he got any investments in government bonds? That's pretty much the only conversation my father-in-law ever has with my husband is, how are you investing your money? I'm pretty sure that my father has similar conversations with my brothers, but other than trying to make sure that I got a job out of university, no one ever had those conversations with me. There weren't even conversations about savings accounts. And savings accounts are a terrible way to make money. The money in your savings account really depreciates a significant amount in real terms over the course of a lifetime. If you look at inflation, definitely you don't end up making any money. You just end up with this sort of, I don't know what it was called, like a nest egg, something to fall back on in troubled times. It's not about making money work for you. It's not about the potential of working capital. It's about security.
Right. It's not growing.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting thing because there's been a lot of studies done that show, in general, when investors speak to female founders about investment, they tend to focus on security-related questions as opposed to growth-related questions. An example of that might be, you have a house. What are you going to do to protect it and make sure that in the case of a robbery, you don't lose a lot of what you've got? Oh, well, I'm going to put these defense systems in place and blah, 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 blah. Basic question might be, you've got this house. How are you going to increase the value of the property if you decide to sell it? And they're kind of both asking about the asset and its value and how you're going to develop it and protect it. But one is very much focused on security and one is focused on growth. This type of question this like security defensive style question, it puts women on the back foot when they're out to raise investment. It gets them focusing on positives, but in a negative way. How are you going to protect what you have? How are you going to compete against other companies? How are you going to protect your intellectual property, as opposed to seeing the growth and the gaps in the market and the potential of the thing that you're building? Those two lenses result in very different outcomes when it comes to securing investment.
You mentioned maybe it goes back to education, to talking about these things, to being exposed to that conversation might open up for more women to want to be involved and to get involved. Now, let's get back to the 2022 Female Angels. Congratulations. I know that you've already reached over 200. Let's just talk a little bit more about how it got started and where you're at with it right now.
So the movement started, and the reason specifically that the movement started is a couple of weeks before, been on a panel at a big conference here where, as we were a number of female panelists, and we were meant to be talking about what we were building, really. And we ended up just talking about how hard it was to raise money. And the suggestion was made, as it often is, that maybe we should look at alternative sources of capital. So rather than going down the standard route in terms of angel investment and VC, could we look at grants? Could we look at crowdfunding? Could we look at donations even? This line of inquiry always frustrates me because the whole point is that we should be competing on equal footing, not creating whole new arenas for ourselves to compete with ourselves in isolation. It frustrated me because I also just wanted to have a conversation about what we were building, because really for me, that's the most interesting thing. And then a couple of weeks later, I was meeting with a female angel investor who'd flown in from another part of the world. And we had one meeting and it was great. And then we were meant to be having a second meeting, kind of a closing meeting. And for perfectly legitimate reasons, she ended up canceling the meeting at the last minute. And I was left feeling very deflated. And that doesn't happen often to me, that I sit and I really feel like the wind's been knocked out of me and I have to kind of gather myself. I'm an eternal optimist. So usually these things wash over me a little bit more easily, but I had really high hopes and they were dashed. I sat and I thought, why is it why is it so hard, actually? Who am I going to speak to next? Where are the other female angel investors? This was such a good one. And so I put a post up on LinkedIn stating that I was going to start a movement, that I was fed up, and wasn't everybody fed up of hearing about women not securing funding? And let's set up a movement to identify 2022 female angel investors for emerging markets by the end of 2022. And let's get those investors in front of a lot of female-led startups to try and, change the dialogue a bit. Anyway, this post really took off. It taught me an important lesson, which is that you should never say you're going to start a movement unless you actually intend to start a movement. But I had so many people respond with questions, with queries, agreeing. I think people who were frustrated because coming out of the pandemic, it was very apparent that when the world is squeezed, it squeezes its women, wanting to change. Yeah, just wanting to change. And several of them said, I'd like to be involved. I thought, great. And thought, actually, if we're going to run this as a proper movement and we're going to hit our target, we're going to need more people involved in managing the whole thing. So we set up a steering committee. We launched that about a month later and launched the movement officially a month later at the Capital Club here in Dubai. And today the Steerco is about 30 men and women divided into multiple committees focused on events, comms, admin, community management, etc. And we are working very hard to hit our target by the end of the year. And I've already started running a lot of educational workshops and things, all in a completely voluntary capacity, to try and educate women who said, yes, I want to be an investor, but no, I haven't made an investment yet, to actually write their first check and start actively investing.
Wow, fantastic. Again, I mean, goes back to you seeing a gap, you seeing a problem, and then you figuring out, let's find a solution to this. But it turned out to be even bigger than you even imagined when you first made that first LinkedIn post. How can someone get involved and be part of the movement?
If you would like to get involved, and the caveat here is, I would say anybody, any women, if you're a woman listening to this podcast, you can get involved because you can invest, even with, a ticket as small as a couple of $100, frankly. We had a minimum $1,000 ticket for our last round, but a lot of companies who are raising early pre-seed rounds will take $300, $400, $500 from friends, family, and early stage angel investors to close a round of $20,000 to $50,000, for example. If you're interested in investing, starting to create and build an investment portfolio, angel investing is fantastic because it allows you to become intimately acquainted with things that you really care about and want to see more of in the world. There are a lot of really exciting companies, particularly here, because they're building for emerging markets. They're building for the Middle East, they're building for Africa, they're building for South Asia, they're building for the next billion people. And you can be part of that in a very tangible way, in a way that doesn't require you to wait until they float on the stock market. Go to our website, 2022, so 2022 femaleangels.network. Right at the top of the page, there is a button that says Become an Angel Investor, or Become a Female Angel Investor. If you click it, it will take you through to a form that you fill in, and you can choose to keep your contact information private. But if you fill in that form, your preferences in terms of investment will be added to the website. You'll start to receive monthly newsletters, invitations to events, to educational workshops, to pitching sessions, and you'll be brought into this fabulous, exciting world of angel investment.
I love that you are educating, you're offering that way into this world for many people that might not even have considered it. And like you say, the entry is maybe doable for people who don't have maybe 10,000, 20,000 to invest, but a couple of $100 just to learn about how to do this and how to get involved. And especially if you can invest into something that you believe in. As you say, there's so many good causes, so many things that people would want to be part of. And with their small investment, they can not only support a cause that they believe in, but also learn about being an angel investor. So, I mean, it's a fantastic idea. I absolutely love it. Well done. Congratulations. You've certainly accomplished a lot already, and super exciting to see where it goes next.
Thanks, Marie. I think the main objective of the Female Angels movement was to eradicate this sense of overwhelming obstacle that you can feel as a female founder going to raise your first round. It's going to take a while for the statistics to change. We're not going to bounce from 1.2% of venture capital invested to 50% because a lot of that capital gets invested in much larger tickets and later rounds. So if you don't have female founders who are securing funding at the early stages, $500,000, $1 million, they're never going to get to the point where they're raising 10, 50, $100 million. So we're not going to see that statistic materially change maybe for the next 3 to 5 years. But if it just starts heading in an upward direction and kind of continuing in that way, it'll be good. And at least in the meantime, we're creating this repository, this directory of angel investors that female founders can access without having to receive warm introductions from people, without having to be invited into any exclusive clubs, without having to sit and wait for those handshakes to be made by people who've got a dozen other priorities, just leveling the playing field a bit. I think if by the time my children decide, and specifically my daughter decides that she'd like to raise a round of investment for a startup that she may have, I kind of dread to think what that may be, honestly. She's a bit of a wild one. I would like her to feel like she's batting on a little bit more level playing field by that stage.
Well, this has been so inspiring. It's been so fantastic. And I could keep on asking you questions, but then the podcast will run too long. So I'm going to stop there. And maybe we can have another chat another day, another recording on this topic, because it's fantastic. But for now, we have come to the segment of our show where I'd like to ask you some rapid fire questions. So our version of a game show. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Who has been your biggest inspiration?
Elon Musk. He is somebody who has defied the odds in just about every way. He is a solo founder in more than one business, which is something that is considered something you don't do. He's fundamentally working for impact and to change the world for the better, and has been very direct and consistent with his views on this. He doesn't care what other people say or think of him, and will often say some quite outrageous things. And people who don't like what he does try and take him down for it all the time. And still he robustly and determinedly does exactly what he thinks is best. He's a maverick. He's pushed industries across multiple verticals, in space, in logistics, in green energy. Yeah, I just think he's a force.
He absolutely is. Yeah. Okay, what is your favorite hobby?
Still, I think horse riding. Between riding and dancing, I used to do ballroom and Latin American dancing at university, and I still do a lot of salsa. But when I was in Scotland growing up, I've always loved horses. They were my great love from as soon as I could proclaim a great love until my early 20s. And they're still the place that I go if I really want to be at peace.
Do you have a favorite quote? And if you do, what is it?
The difficult is what takes a little time. The impossible is what takes a little longer.
Wow, I love that. What is one thing you do every day, no matter how busy you are?
I make my bed.
Funny, that's exactly what I would say.
Yeah, it just draws a line. It's like, okay, the night is done. This is a new day, and the day is going to start with clean edges.
I love that. Yes, it does sort of set your day off on the right foot. Excellent. Thank you very much. That was the end of our game show. So you did well. Thank you for playing along. Before we wrap up, we'd like to do our green pill moment. So what green pill advice would you give to your younger self?
So it's not a piece of advice, because I think that would be changing the direction of history. And from all of the time travel films that I have watched, I believe that to be a bad idea. But I would ask my younger self a question. I would ask, have you thought about becoming an engineer? Because when I was growing up, I come from a family of engineers, or definitely both my grandfathers were engineers. My younger brother just completed his degree in engineering, again at Cambridge, actually. And ever since I was tiny, 2, 3, I've been building stuff. I used to build giant paper castles and ships out of paper. This was when I was little, like maybe 3 years old. The stories, I would make all of the furniture, the windows, the window frames, everything in an unusual amount of detail. And I've always loved building. And not once in my childhood did anyone ever say to me, have you thought about becoming an engineer? I'm certain it's because I'm a girl. So, I read history at university because it was the subject I was best at school. And actually my school was great, comprehensive, just outside Croydon, but it didn't have particularly great science teachers, and it didn't have a huge amount. It didn't have a construction club, for example, anything in the kind of building space, certainly not when I started there. So I never thought about becoming an engineer. My grandfather, who is an amazing man in many ways, still today maintains that women can't study physics, even though my youngest sister is reading physics and philosophy at Oxford as we speak. And I wish someone had asked me the question, because I am an engineer. It's what I love. I love building things. I always have. And it just never occurred to me when I was growing up that it was a career I could pursue.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you for sharing your whole journey. It's been fantastic. It's absolutely inspiring. You've accomplished so much. You're making a difference, and there's no doubt about that. So I wish you all the best on your journey, and for sure I'll be watching where you go next. Before we say goodbye, though, could you please tell our listeners where they can find and follow you? And we'll also put this in the show notes.
If you would like to follow Nabta Health, you can find us on every social channel, including now TikTok. As of about a week ago, you just need to search Nabta Health, Nabta health.com. 2022 Female Angels is also there as a page that you can find on LinkedIn. You can follow us there. You can find us on our website. I've always said I'm much more comfortable being the voice of the company than the face of the company. So where I tend to get my feelings out, again, is on LinkedIn, and usually on topics relating to women's health, women in investment, and gender equity in general.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you so much for being the guest on the show today. It's been absolutely inspirational.
Thanks for having me, Hilmarie.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.